It's late. The house is finally quiet in that strange way houses only get quiet after a certain hour. The dishwasher has finished its little mechanical sermon. The refrigerator is humming in the background like it has opinions. There's a mug on the kitchen table with a ring of coffee cooling around the edges because, once again, I made it hot and then forgot to drink it while I was thinking about money. Not glamorous money, not private jet money, just normal, deeply human money. The kind of money that shows up in a bank app at 11:43 p.m. while you're half tired, half curious, and maybe a little more emotionally fragile than you'd like to admit. Maybe you know the moment I'm talking about. You open your laptop because you're just checking something, which is usually a lie we tell ourselves right before we stare at numbers and somehow make them mean something about our worth as a person. You look at your retirement accounts. You look at the market. You look at that one holding that's down more than you'd prefer. You look at the total and try to feel grateful, but what you actually feel is hard to describe. It's not panic exactly. It's more like a low electrical hum of uncertainty. Am I doing enough? Am I behind? Should this number be bigger by now? Why does progress feel so slow when I'm trying so hard to be responsible? And maybe the weirdest part is that even when the numbers are objectively not bad, the feeling doesn't always go away. You can get a raise, automate your contributions, read the books, avoid the truly stupid financial mistakes, and still sit at a kitchen table under a dim overhead light feeling like maybe everybody else understands this better than you do. I think a lot of people assume financial stress only belongs to people who are broke, but that's not really how it works. Sometimes financial stress belongs to people who are doing okay, maybe even doing pretty well, but who still haven't crossed that invisible internal line where money stops feeling like a constant referendum on their future. That feeling, that quiet, late-night, kitchen table anxiety is what I want to talk about today. Because when it comes to retirement, being way ahead of everyone else usually doesn't look the way people think it does. I'm Dave, and I spend a crazy amount of time thinking about money. Not in the fun internet way where people argue about whether you should own this fund or that fund, or whether some guy on a podcast is secretly a genius because he uses the word macro a lot. I mean, I think about money the way some people think about sleep or marriage or parenting. I think about what money does to people internally. I think about why two people with the exact same income can feel completely different levels of peace. I think about why one person gets a raise and feels relief for about 6 days, while somebody else builds a quiet kind of stability that changes their whole posture toward life. And a lot of these thoughts come out in conversations with my friend Rick. He's the kind of friend you can have coffee with for an hour and somehow end up talking about childhood, identity, investing, regret, and whether buying nicer patio furniture was a meaningful life upgrade or just suburban performance art. Those are my favorite conversations because they remind me that money is never just math. It's memory, it's fear, it's hope. It's the stories we absorbed when we were young. It's the meaning we attach to being safe. So when I say 4 signs your retirement portfolio is way ahead of everyone else, I'm not really talking about whether your number is bigger than your neighbor's. Honestly, your neighbor might be financing a truck the size of a naval vessel and telling himself he's winning. I don't want that benchmark for you. I don't even want it for me. I'm talking about something more useful. I'm talking about whether your portfolio has started changing your psychology. Because here's something that took me an embarrassingly long time to understand. The real milestone in retirement investing is not the moment the number becomes impressive. It's the moment the number begins to reduce fear. That's the shift. People think being ahead means a giant account balance, a perfect spreadsheet, a paid-off house, maybe a dramatic declaration that you can retire at 52 and spend weekdays pretending to enjoy pickleball. But psychologically, being ahead means something quieter than that. It means you've built margin. It means you've built options. It means your future no longer feels like a cliff edge, and that changes more than your balance sheet. It changes the texture of ordinary days. Because what most people are chasing when they say they want more money is not actually more money. They want less pressure. They want to stop feeling ambushed by life. They want to stop making every decision with the emotional tone of somebody trying to land a plane with one engine out. That's why I think the conventional picture of retirement success is a little misleading. It makes people focus on a visible outcome instead of the invisible threshold that matters more. The threshold isn't, can I impress someone with this number? The threshold is, has my financial life become sturdy enough that my nervous system trusts it? That's a very different question. And it's also why some people with large portfolios still behave like they're one flat tire away from catastrophe, while other people with less money carry themselves with this calm, grounded steadiness that makes you think, okay, something important has happened here. So let's talk about the 4 signs. The first sign your retirement portfolio is way ahead of everyone else is that market declines no longer feel like a verdict on your life. I don't mean you enjoy them. If you enjoy watching your account go down, you may need hobbies. I mean a down market no longer throws you into a spiritual crisis. You know that feeling when the market drops and suddenly your brain starts narrating everything in the darkest possible voice? Of course this would happen. Maybe I started investing at the worst time. Maybe I should move everything to cash. Maybe the whole system is broken. Maybe I'm an idiot. That spiral is incredibly human. Behavioral finance has a phrase for part of this: loss aversion. We feel losses more intensely than gains. $10,000 disappearing from a screen feels emotionally louder than $10,000 quietly appearing over time. The pain has a siren on it. The gain often arrives like a polite knock at the door. And if your retirement portfolio is still psychologically fragile, every downturn feels personal. It feels like the future is slipping. It feels like you did all the right things and still got punished. But when your portfolio is truly ahead, something subtle changes. A down market still gets your attention, but it doesn't hijack your identity. You stop interpreting volatility as evidence that you are failing. You start seeing it as the price of admission for long-term growth. Not pleasant, not fun, but not surprising. That sounds like a small change. It's not. Because once a downturn stops feeling like a verdict, you gain something almost more valuable than return. You gain emotional consistency, and emotional consistency is rare. People underestimate how much wealth is destroyed not by bad markets, but by bad reactions. Panic selling, stopping contributions, turning a temporary decline into a permanent scar because the fear felt unbearable in the moment. I've seen this in ordinary life. A person checks their retirement account after a rough quarter, then spends the next 3 days distracted at work, mildly irritable at dinner, and weirdly certain that they need to do something, even if the something is dumb. That's not really an investing problem. That's a nervous system problem. When your portfolio is ahead, you're not fearless, you're just less reactive. You've internalized a truth most people only repeat intellectually. Short-term pain is often the cost of long-term peace. And that calm has ripple effects. You sleep differently, you talk differently. You stop checking your balance with the same emotional energy people use to read medical test results. The second sign your retirement portfolio is way ahead of everyone else is that it has created real financial slack. This is one of my favorite concepts because it sounds boring, and boring is deeply underrated. Financial slack is that cushion between what life costs and what life demands from you right now. It's the margin that keeps every inconvenience from becoming an emergency. It's the ability to absorb a rough stretch without immediately feeling hunted. Psychologists and behavioral economists have written about scarcity in a way that I think is incredibly helpful. When people feel scarcity, whether it's a lack of money, time, or stability, it narrows attention. It eats mental bandwidth. Your brain starts tunneling toward the urgent thing, and your capacity for patient, long-range thinking gets weaker, which makes sense. If you feel cornered, you don't think like a strategist. You think like a firefighter. That's why being ahead in retirement isn't only about the absolute size of the portfolio. It's about whether the portfolio has begun reducing scarcity in your mind. What actually changes when that happens? Well, here's where it gets interesting. You stop feeling like every paycheck is carrying the full weight of your existence. You stop looking at your job as the single fragile bridge holding up your entire future. You stop interpreting normal uncertainty as disaster. And maybe most importantly, you make better decisions because you're no longer making them from a cramped psychological place. This is the quiet threshold a lot of people miss. They think they'll feel secure once the number gets huge. But security often starts earlier than that, when you realize your life has some resilience built into it. If the market has a bad year, you're not wiped out. If work gets weird, you have time to think. If you need to make a transition, your portfolio is beginning to function like a backup nervous system. Not because it solves everything. It doesn't. But because it gives you room. And room changes people. A person with no room says yes too quickly, spends too impulsively, and panics too easily. A person with room can pause. They can wait a week before making a decision. They can endure discomfort without immediately trying to escape it with spending or trading or dramatic reinvention. That's a big deal. A lot of wealth, I think, is really just accumulated room. The third sign your retirement portfolio is way ahead of everyone else is that your lifestyle has not expanded as fast as your income. This one is sneaky because it doesn't feel like a retirement story at first. It feels like a kitchen renovation story, or a we deserve this story, or a well, everybody at work seems to live this way now story. Lifestyle inflation is one of the most normal things in the world. You earn more, so your life expands to meet it. A slightly nicer apartment turns into a much nicer house. A reliable car turns into a statement. Meals out become default. Vacations become recovery rituals you now believe are essential for basic functioning. None of this is inherently evil. I like comfort. I am not recording this from a candlelit cabin I built with moral superiority and reclaimed wood. But lifestyle inflation has a psychological trick built into it. It makes upgrades feel permanent and savings feel optional. That's the trap. You don't experience the raise as extra capacity for your future. You experience it as permission for a more expensive present. And once the present gets more expensive, the future has to work harder to compensate. So when I say your retirement portfolio is way ahead, I'm often talking about something invisible, the gap between what you could spend and what you chose not to normalize. That gap is where portfolios become powerful, not because deprivation is noble. It isn't. And I don't think the goal of life is to become some pale, joyless spreadsheet monk. But people who get way ahead usually did something very unfashionable for a very long time. They left space between their earnings and their identity. They did not need their lifestyle to rise every time their income did. That takes more emotional maturity than people realize. Because a lot of spending is not about pleasure. It's about signaling. It's about soothing. It's about trying to make the outside of life match the effort we feel on the inside. I work hard, so I should have this, which is understandable. Deeply understandable. Most people are tired. Most people want evidence that the grind is leading somewhere tangible. But if every reward becomes a recurring expense, you can end up with a high-income life that feels strangely brittle. A big paycheck, a beautiful house, a packed calendar, and underneath it all, no real margin. That's not ahead, that's expensive. Meanwhile, someone else quietly kept the house they didn't have to impress anyone with, drove the car that still worked, automated investments before they got used to the raise, and built a retirement portfolio that now carries real weight in their life. They don't look richer at a stoplight, but they are freer in ways that matter more. The fourth sign your retirement portfolio is way ahead of everyone else is that it has started changing your behavior before retirement, actually, arrives. This is my favorite sign because it reveals the deepest truth of the whole conversation. Retirement investing is not really about retirement. Not entirely. It's about the kind of person you get to become when desperation loosens its grip. When a portfolio starts getting strong enough, something almost spiritual happens, not glamorous spiritual. No wind chimes. I just mean your relationship to time begins to change. You become harder to rush. You become less seducible by short-term noise. You don't need every year to be a breakthrough year. You don't need every decision to pay off instantly. You start making choices from optionality instead of urgency. And optionality is one of the most underrated forms of wealth on earth. Optionality means you can leave a bad job without feeling like you're stepping off a cliff. It means you can say, I need to think about it, instead of grabbing the first offer out of fear. It means you can invest in skills, in health, in relationships, in your own patience. It means you can withstand a period where life is messy without deciding that everything is broken. That's what actually changes. Not just the account balance, the tone of your decisions. I've noticed this in people who are quietly ahead. They don't always talk about money much, which is refreshing. They're not trying to dominate dinner conversations with tax strategies and market opinions they picked up from a guy wearing a quarter zip on YouTube. They just seem less trapped. They can afford to think long-term because they have built a life that gives long-term thinking a chance. And that's not just a money skill. That's a human skill. Of course, there's a big objection sitting in the room here, and it deserves respect. A lot of people hear conversations like this and think, that sounds nice, Dave, but real life is expensive. Yes, it is. Housing is expensive, kids are expensive, healthcare is expensive, existing as a person with teeth and a vehicle and some basic desire for dignity is expensive. So I never want to talk about retirement investing in a way that sounds like everybody who isn't ahead just lacks discipline. That's lazy analysis and usually a sign that someone has confused their own path with universal truth. The obstacle for most people is not stupidity. It's pressure. Pressure creates short horizons. Pressure makes convenience feel necessary. Pressure makes it hard to care about a version of yourself that exists 30 years from now when the current version of you is just trying to get through Thursday. And then there's the emotional side of it. Some people grew up watching money disappear as fast as it came in. Some people internalize the idea that security is fragile or that enjoyment should happen immediately because tomorrow is uncertain. Some people became the responsible one in the family so early that money still feels less like a tool and more like a moral test they can fail. All of that matters. Which is why the most compassionate thing we can say about building a retirement portfolio is not just be more disciplined. It's try to build a little space because space changes your behavior. Maybe at first that space is tiny. Maybe it's one automated increase. Maybe it's one raise not fully absorbed by lifestyle. Maybe it's choosing not to panic during a downturn. Maybe it's finally admitting that the expensive version of your life is not actually the meaningful version. These are not dramatic moves, but they are identity moves, and identity, more than information, is what shapes financial outcomes over time. Because the people who get ahead are not usually the people who know the most. They're the people who become the kind of person who can tolerate boredom, delay gratification, ignore social comparison, and keep showing up when progress is invisible. That's rare, that's difficult, and that's why it works. There's also something important to say about comparison, because the title of this conversation is way ahead of everyone else, and that phrase can get weird quickly if we're not careful. I don't think the goal is to outrun everyone else. That game has no finish line. There will always be somebody with a larger account, earlier retirement, better timing thing, smarter sounding opinions, and a suspiciously well-lit home office. If your definition of ahead depends on them disappearing, you're going to feel behind forever. The healthier definition is this: you are ahead when your retirement portfolio has put meaningful distance between you and panic. You are ahead when your future is no longer hanging entirely on your next paycheck. You are ahead when volatility does not rewrite your personality for a week. You are ahead when your lifestyle still serves your values instead of consuming your raises by default. You are ahead when your money gives you more choice, more patience, and more honesty. That's ahead. And the beautiful thing is that from the outside, it often looks ordinary. It looks like a person making coffee in a normal kitchen, going to a normal job, living in a normal house, not needing to perform success for strangers. But internally, the transformation is profound. What does life look like after that transformation starts? It looks quieter, not easier in every way. Life still does what life does. Markets still wobble, appliances still die at impolite times, work still gets political, bodies still age. Children still surprise you financially and otherwise, but ordinary life gets less charged. A raise feels less like oxygen and more like opportunity. A market decline feels less like a threat and more like weather. A job becomes a role you perform, not an authority you fear. Conversations with your spouse about money become less defensive because there's less desperation hiding underneath them. You can imagine the future without tightening your jaw. And maybe the biggest shift of all is that you stop needing money to constantly prove something to you. That to me is one of the most underrated forms of wealth. When you no longer need your portfolio to tell you every day that you're okay, you're finally in a position to let it do what it was always supposed to do, quietly compound in the background while you build an actual life. Because that's the deeper lesson, isn't it? The portfolio is not the point. The point is the person you become while building it. The habits you practice, the urges you learn to question, the stories you stop believing, the patience you develop, the self-respect that comes from making decisions your future self will thank you for, even when nobody claps for them in the moment. Money is powerful, but mostly because it amplifies character and reduces noise. It reveals whether you can tell the difference between relief and status, between comfort and excess, between freedom and display. And once you start seeing retirement that way, the whole project feels less like a race and more like a philosophy of enough, a philosophy of margin, a philosophy of not handing your emotional life over to every market headline and every social comparison and every temporary desire dressed up as necessity. I think that's why this subject matters so much. Not because retirement is some distant event at the end of the map, but because the process of preparing for it teaches you how to live now with more steadiness. It teaches you to widen the gap between impulse and action. It teaches you that security is often built quietly. It teaches you that a good financial life is rarely dramatic from the outside, and maybe most importantly, it teaches you that peace of mind is not something you buy all at once. It's something you assemble, contribution by contribution, choice by choice, year by year. So let me bring this back to that kitchen table. It's late again. Same room, same refrigerator hum, same coffee. Probably reheated once because I continue to believe I can outsmart thermodynamics with a microwave. The laptop is open. The account is there. The numbers are still numbers. The future is still the future, which means some part of it will always be unknowable. But the feeling is different now, not because every fear is gone, not because the portfolio is perfect, not because life has become predictable. The feeling is different because there is space where panic used to be. There is process where there used to be guessing. There is patience where there used to be urgency. There is a growing sense that the purpose of all this saving and investing was never just to reach a magical age with a magical number. It was to build a life that feels less cornered, less fragile, more intentional. And if your retirement portfolio is starting to do that for you, even quietly, even imperfectly, then you may be much further ahead than you realize. Not ahead in the loud, performative way, ahead in the way that matters, ahead in peace, ahead in resilience, ahead in the ability to look at your future and not flinch. If this resonated with you, I'd love for you to stick around, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs a calmer way to think about money. Because the goal was never just to build a bigger portfolio. It was to build a life you can actually breathe inside.